This is the tool everyone has been asking about. It is a Callus shaver with replaceable blades. I got this over 20 years ago, and it has this larger hole, which most of the ones made today do not have, but it's just a really excellent tool for what I have to do. And the plastic handle broke off of it when my husband and I were dating about a decade ago, and he made this clay handle for it, which we fired in the oven, and he had me grip it in all the different ways that I hold it for shaving so that it has like the perfect indentations and works just ideally for me. Thank you, babe. And I use about half a blade because it's double-sided for each hand or each foot. And when I'm done, I throw them in this steel can of beans that I saved. And when the can gets full, I recycle them. Lots of comments saying that people have tried this tool themselves and it's cut them way too deep. And I want to explain why. This blade, look at the angle of it. If you're holding the shaver down like this, look at the angle of that blade. It's pointing straight down into your foot. And if you start going, bam, you're going to cut too deep immediately. What I do is I keep it flat like this. Now look at the angle of that blade. It's nearly flush with my skin. And that's how I'm able to get these thin little cuts. I'm just going to do one right here for you guys. Super thin. And it's because the angle of the blade is nearly flush with my foot or the surface of my skin, which is also why I don't usually use this tool for the little tiny multi-curved surfaces like my toes. It's mostly for the big flat surfaces. And as long as you keep the blade mostly parallel to the surface of your skin, it shouldn't cut too deep. It's only when you start holding the cutter like this that now that blade is angled right down and you're going to get a deep cut really fast. So pro tip, hold it like this, not like this. There have been so many questions about all the tools that I use, so I thought I'd give a very quick overview. Everyone asking if I use a pumice stone or an e-file or anything, generally not. After a shower, I will use a nail brush to slough off all the dead skin that's piled up that can just quickly be brushed off because it's become saturated with water. And that really helps keep things smooth. I have tried pumice stones and foot files and e-files and callus files that are electronic of all kinds. And I generally find that they either don't really affect my skin because it's too moisturized, or they get really gunked up and it's just a very labor-intensive process that's no fun. Whereas just regular removal when the skin is wet, just by brushing it off, works really great for me. Then regularly for my feet, I will soak them in water. This is about once a month. I used to use a knife like this, that's very dull, don't worry, to scrape all the excess skin off once it's very, very wet, like a 1 to 2 hour soak in water. But I am trying to move away from using a dull knife. And I recently got a Callus pedicure knife, and I don't know if I can make it focus, but this really is an interesting tool that I'm going to be trying. I don't know if I can get the right leverage because it's quite hard to scrape off, but this looks kind of sharp. So we're going to give it a go, and I'll have a future video about that. And then for all the details in my toes and my fingertips and fingernail areas, I use these are hangnail clippers, and they have this part that bends up. One side has like more tension than the other, so you can pick how much resistance you want the clippers to have. But these work great just for getting all the details. I find they work better than cuticle scissors. Then you've all seen this tool. This is a Callus shaver. You'll never find one with a handle like this because mine is custom made out of Sculpey, but they all have a top that looks like this. This uses replaceable blades, which you can get in 10 packs. I actually buy them in 100 packs. So this is 10 packs of 10, but it's full of these little tiny boxes, and inside the boxes are these little tiny packets with blades on the inside. And they go in this tool. I have other videos showing how to take it apart and replace the blades. So this I use on my hands in addition to using the hangnail clippers. And I also use it on my feet after they've been soaked and scraped, usually with this or with any new tool I find. When the skin is supple, I can then shave them. Or if there really isn't a lot of dead skin to scrape off and the skin is very moisturized on my feet, I can just go straight to this tool. I also, to work on my cuticles and all the skin that builds up around the edges of the nails, because it can get quite thick and kind of start growing up on top of the nail and up underneath the nail. I use a metal nail file, which I find is more effective than other sandpaper-like files. I suddenly can't think of what they're called. And I use a metal cuticle pusher, and this little thing also really helps get the skin off the underside of the nails. Those are my tools. And for regular moisturization, I know people think I must use some really heavy-duty creams, but I actually love this lotion. I've been using it for like 10, 15 years. It used to be called St. Ives 24-Hour Moisture, but now it's just St. Ives Hydrating Body Lotion. Has an avocado on the front. The thing is that the heavier creams that are really, really oily, and like O'Keeffe's Working Hands, Gold Bond, you name it, they have so much oil in them, and I can't use them all day long. It'll just build up and build up and build up on my hands until they feel sticky and goopy, and then I have to wash them all the time, which negates the lotion. So instead, this is water-based. It soaks in really fast and keeps my hands flexible and hydrated without leaving a greasy after feeling. So that's all I do. That's my entire life. My husband found that video and I was so excited because I'd never seen a scraper like this before, but I bought these on Amazon after seeing that video. I'm so excited to try this one the next time I soak and scrape my feet. It's actually quite sharp, so I will try it. And these two might actually work for my toes when scraping after a soak, which is really exciting because I rarely scrape them after soaking just because that's such a delicate area. And this is the pedicure knife that I bought recently, also quite sharp. So I'm really looking forward to trying these two the next time I soak and scrape, which should be in a week or probably 2 weeks. And these ones I'm going to experiment with as well. Eee! Hello everyone, I want to clear up some confusion here really quickly. I am not replacing this shaver with this. No. Every 3 weeks to 1 month, I soak my feet in water and scrape the dead outer layer of the skin off, which if you'll remember, I used to do with this blade. I'm trying to move away from using a dull old kitchen knife, and this is the new tool. I got that other scraper tool as well that looks kind of like a scalpel, and it does an all right job, but this one is definitely the tool. This is for shaving every 2 to 3 months when there's no more dead skin to scrape off, because I've been soaking and scraping every few weeks, but the callus is still extremely thick. That's when we come in with the blade. I hope that helps. For those of you concerned about my methods, this is an excellent comprehensive article from the Indian Journal Online for Dermatology. Treatment of PPK. Patient needs to be educated for taking care of hyperkeratonic hands and feet. Mechanical debridement with a blade or dental drill is the recommended treatment. Thank you very much. Sure. This is a Callus shaver. Credo is the OG brand if you're looking for it on Amazon. And you just slide the back down toward the handle and then it comes off. And that's how you replace these replaceable razor blades, which you can also buy on Amazon or other places. And you got to make sure you orient it correctly. If you put the backing on upside down, once you slide it onto the shaver, the metal will cover the blade and it will be totally useless. So make sure you're putting it in upright so that the blade sticks out on the bottom and there is a hole for the callus to come through right there. And in my other video, I mentioned that hole and people thought I was talking about the circular hole, but no, it's that hole which needs to be big enough to get callus through, and you got to get the right brand to have a big enough hole to get the callus through. I came up with a trick for myself. I put the words upright when I replace the blade, and then once that side is dull, I flip it with the words upside down, and that's how I know I'm on the second side of the blade, and when it gets dull, I need to change the whole blade out completely. But with the brand new blade put in, you just have to kind of push the bottom up into the top and slide it on, and there you go. Okay, let's do an experiment with a nail drill and a sanding bit. My toes are starting to get thick around the edges because it's been a couple of weeks since I trimmed them up, and it gets a little uncomfortable the thicker that it gets. So Let's try it out with the nail drill and sanding them down as opposed to clipping them. Here's a nail drill that I have. I use it for taking down my gel nail polish when I redo my nails. I'm going to start just on this one toe. It's taking off a thin layer, although I'm struggling to get the skin on the sides of my toes where it basically always stays damp. This is partly because I sweat on my feet, but also because I moisturize them all the time. So I'm like struggling to get the edges. I seem to be able to go over it and not have it take it down. Versus here is my other toe, and I'm going to clip it with the hangnail clippers. To do the sanding of the first toe, it took 1 minute and 40 seconds. And to do the hangnail clippers on this other toe, it took 1 minute and 45 seconds. So basically the exact same amount of time. But look how much pinker and lower that callus got on the second toe. Now, for extra proof as to why I prefer clipping, I'm going to come in and use the hangnail clippers on the toe that I just sanded, and you can see how much more comes off. I know it might look sensitive and uncomfortable to have it so pink, but actually that's the lowness or the thinness of the callus that I prefer. I actually have contact with all my nerves and sensation in my toes. Look how much better that is. Let's come in and try to do the big toe. So much dust coming off of this. This is another reason maybe I don't prefer sanding, but you can see around the edges, it struggles to get up much. Around the middle where it's drier, it is making some good progress. Took me a few minutes to do this toe, which is why everything's so sped up. But besides the messiness, it's noisy, so I just don't like it that much. It's doing an all right job. But let's come in with the callus shaver and see how much more we can get off. Look at this. So if I were to try and sand it down to get it to a level where I prefer it with the sanding tool, I would have to not only let it dry out much drier than I would prefer my skin to feel, but then I would have to sand and sand and sand and sand to try and get down to the level that I can get to pretty quickly with the callus shaver. So there you go. I really just prefer shaving it off because it works great. And for your viewing pleasure, you can see me do the rest of the toes here. I'm just going to get them really quick with the hangnail clippers. Some people say they couldn't stand the bumpiness that clippers can leave, and it can be bumpy if you're not kind of precise like I'm being. I do work really hard to get it to an even level, even though I'm clipping. And also I find that after just a few hours, the skin kind of levels itself out. I don't know how to describe it other than that, but wherever it might have a little bit of ridges, it will actually get pretty smooth after just a little while of relaxing into the softer skin. And so it doesn't bother me. Works for me. Okay, I will humor you guys a little bit more. Remember I told you that after clipping, they really tend to smooth themselves out and there really are no more ridges anymore? This is 48 hours since that sanding video, and they're very smooth. There's like no ridges at all. But I'm going to come in with this, I think it's 80 grit drill bit that I used in the last video, which is why it's not perfectly clean. And I'm going to try and sand down these moist parts. Especially the yellowish parts where the keratin is like slightly thicker because I didn't make them perfectly even. I mean, it's getting a tiny bit. You can see a little bit of fine dust coming off of there, but do you see any difference? Ultimately, no. I mean, I really sanded the crap out of that toe until the bit got hot and I didn't want to do it anymore. And it makes almost no difference. Some people said, well, maybe you need to try like a metal bit, something finer. So here, let's go in with this. And unfortunately, you're going to see that it doesn't even touch the skin. The problem here is that the skin is too moist, and really soft, moist skin acts like regular skin. So sanding it, it's just not dry enough. It just kind of gets rubbed and starts to make the drill bit very hot. In fact, on my big toe here, I could not even get it to take anything off. Another suggestion was more like 120 grit. So I'm going to use that here on the edge of my foot where it's really gets dry all the time. And you can see initially it takes off a huge bunch of dust. And so it did get some of the very, very topmost dry skin off, and that was nice. But then very quickly gunked up and started to make my skin super hot because it's moist skin underneath. And as soon as the skin isn't extremely dry, it's not removing much. It's mostly just spinning against the skin and causing tons of friction. So this is not a terrible method. If I was really in a rush and had maybe a bigger sander, I could come around and do the edges just a little bit on the side to smooth it out where it's feeling rough and dry, but I really don't need to, because when I take a shower later today, I can take a nail brush and just scrub that really dry part, and it'll take off just as much dry skin. This callus shaver that I'm always using and absolutely love and recommend for thick calluses is called a Credo blade or Credo callus shaver. And the reason I recommend it is because of that larger gap between the blade and the tool, so you can take off more callus. Most of the ones on the market today are designed to take off very, very thin little layers, which is great and very safe if you have normal calluses. But if you're dealing with hyperkeratosis, tylosis, maybe some forms of psoriasis with thick hyperkeratosis, you really need a blade that can take off more than just the tiniest, most paper thin layer. Anyway, today at Walmart, I randomly stumbled upon these Onyx brand ones. And as you can see in the packages, we can see through and see that the gap between the blade and the metal blade holder is significantly larger. So if you're looking for a more heavy duty one, and for whatever reason you don't want to buy the Credo ones linked in my bio, now you know. And also I'll just show you that I did pick up one of these Amope callus shaver. They're a drum sander, I should say, not shaver, for my son to try.